Welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Christina Thompson. The all-important bilateral meeting took place earlier today in Indonesia between President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. It's all taking place in Bali ahead of the G20 summit, and that's where our own senior correspondent John Huddy, he joins us live. Good morning, John. Take us through your busy day.
Good morning. Well, yeah, in fact, that meeting between President Biden and President Xi Jinping just wrapped up right around 15-20 minutes ago. It lasted about 3 hours, which was a pretty long meeting. Look, we knew it was going to be a long one. We didn't know it was going to last 3 hours. We thought maybe an hour and a half. But it started right around 5:45 local time. It would have been 4:45 Eastern. So what came out of it, if any specific deliverables came out of it, if any agreements came out of it, remains unseen. President Biden will be speaking about it in a short time, in about 20 minutes. He's expected to give a press conference not far from here, actually, at the resort where it happened. But look, this is the first face-to-face meeting between President Biden and his Chinese counterpart since President Biden took office. They've talked a number of times over the phone and in teleconference over the last 18 months, but it's the first face-to-face meeting that they've had. It's actually the first time that Xi Jinping has been out of China since the pandemic and post-pandemic. So it perhaps shows that maybe the Chinese president is going to start going out more, possibly for more summits like this. But also, it's the first face-to-face, in-person meeting that they've had since really relations between both countries have gone to an all-time, have deteriorated to an all-time low with conflict over Taiwan. That's a major issue. It's being followed very closely here in the Indo-Pacific, particularly during the G20. Also, China's relationship with Russia as the war in Ukraine continues, and also certainly conflict over technology. So what came out of this? Look, it's very important, and the significance of this wasn't lost on both leaders. Both recognized how important, how serious a meeting this was, how important a face-to-face was in light of the ongoing situation. And it's certainly something that the media has talked about. I was in the media center at the Bali International Convention Center, which is where the media center, massive media center, you know, hundreds of journalists from all over the world are gathered there. I was there throughout the day. This meeting was certainly the main topic of discussion, along with the G20 and some of the issues, economic sustainability in the Indo-Pacific, the environment, things like this. But obviously what comes out of this meeting, what comes out of this summit, if anything, remains to be seen. We're going to be following closely, guys. Back to you.
John, what is the feel there in Indonesia? I mean, first about Taiwan, of course. Has the G20 in today's bilateral, has it been overshadowed at all by the war in Ukraine? Is that something they're focusing on?
Well, it's certainly something being talked about. Is it being overshadowed? Is the war in Ukraine overshadowing the G20? I wouldn't say so. Keep in mind that Russian President Vladimir Putin is not here. Instead, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is. Now, if Putin was here, I think that would dominate the headlines as well. But he's not. So the war in Ukraine, while a topic and while a focus, is not dominating the headlines. Not as of yet.
John Huddy, thank you. We'll be seeing you throughout the day. Rob?
All right, Christina, thank you. Let's continue that conversation and welcome in the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S. China Tech War, Gordon Chang, with us this morning. Gordon, so nice to have you on. We heard the opening remarks about 3 hours ago from both President Biden and President Xi in China. Cookie cutter, although Joe Biden did mention climate change. I'm not sure if that should be his focus right now. But what are you hoping? What message does Joe Biden need to deliver to the Chinese leader while these meetings are taking place?
The message should be that China's conduct is unacceptable. The U.S. will impose costs. And, we don't view friendly relations as being important. What's important is that the international community has a China which is a responsible member. And if China isn't a responsible member, there will be consequences. That's the message that I think he should deliver. I'm not so sure that's the message that he, in fact, delivered.
Joe Biden apparently has a good relationship with President Xi Jinping. They haven't met in person since 2017. I believe that Donald Trump in 2019 was the last U.S. leader to meet with President Xi in person. Does that work to Biden's advantage at all?
No, Xi Jinping doesn't have good relations with any other foreign leader. China has relations which are dominated by Chinese statecraft. We saw this, for instance, Rob, in that opening shot where Xi Jinping is standing in the middle of the room and Biden walks toward him. That showed that Biden was the supplicant in the Chinese views and in actually the views of Asia as well. And so, this is round one to China. And I don't know why Biden ever agreed to that, but it's probably a complete failure of advance work.
Well, Gordon, I think you could speculate that it goes back to those questions about whether Joe Biden's really got all his marbles. Fine, you can blame it on the advance team, but I don't think that his predecessor would do that if all things were equal, would have walked toward President Xi. I didn't even see that this morning, or I didn't pick up on it, but now that you say it, you make a good point. How important is Joe Biden's message with regard to Taiwan and, of course, President Xi's support of Russia in the war in Ukraine?
Absolutely critical. And here I think Biden will do the right thing. He will lay down the red line, as the president said during his press conference on Wednesday. Also, the Biden administration's prep work on Taiwan was excellent. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, on Thursday said that the United States was going to brief Taiwan on the issue. Now, all administrations brief Taiwan on upcoming China summits, but nobody before has actually announced that publicly. And the Chinese were really ticked off. That's a good thing. And so this was something that Jake Sullivan did, which was, I thought, very, very good. Set the right tone for Bali. Yeah,
I agree. The rumor is that Vladimir Putin might be suffering from some type of cancer. We talked about that. So he sent his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, in his place. He apparently is in the hospital. He was taken there after he arrived in Bali, Indonesia. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that I hadn't heard. And clearly that is not good in the sense that the United States needs to also have important conversations with Russia, because here again, it is the red lines of the use of nuclear weapons. We saw that hypersonic missile on the belly of a Russian fighter over, I think it was Belarus. That's not a good sign for what the Russians have in store. The Russians have been actually deploying their nuclear assets in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Again, the United States needs to make it extremely clear what will happen should the Russians use their most destructive weapons.
Okay, Gordon, just about 15 seconds if I could. And I bring this up just because everybody except for Biden and Xi were wearing masks during the opening remarks. Do you think Biden talks about COVID origins at all? Is that even brought up?
He has not raised it in his 5 video or phone conferences with Xi Jinping. I doubt that it was raised today. That is a terrible mistake on the part of the United States. We absolutely need to have that to dominate the conversation. 1,074,000 Americans have been killed by this disease, according to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center.
Yeah, and you can see Janet Yellen right there wearing a mask. So bizarre. Okay, Gordon Chang, we'll wait to hear from the president. He's set to speak in just about 6 minutes. We'll bring you that live. Gordon Chang joining us this morning. Breaking it all down as always, Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.